is For Advisors by Advisors. I'm your host, Evan J. Mayer, and today we have a very special guest in Mr. Paul McManus. Sounds like the Panther game last night. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing fantastic, Evan. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Paul is the host of Million Dollar Producer Show, and he's also an author of the short book Formula. Does lots of speaking engagements. Did some Googling and kind of saw some of the content you put out and what you do. And basically, the bottom line is your niche is you try to help financial advisors become more successful, get leads, get referrals, and grow their practices. And interesting enough, you were a CEO of an office supply company prior to this. So tell us a little bit about your history in the business. What caused you to get into helping financial advisors? Because from your background, it doesn't look like that was something you were in prior.
I appreciate the research you've done, and I have to share something. I mean this as a humorous story, but I typically, when I introduce myself, I say my name is Paul G. McManus, and exactly for the reason, or for one of the reasons that you said, is that you Googled me. And of course, when you Google someone in today's age, you find out a lot about them typically. And I learned a lesson in personal branding not too many years ago where I Googled Paul McManus without the middle initial. And I was shocked to discover that I was a bloodthirsty axe murderer out of Ireland. And the whole first 3 pages of Google was all about my sordid past. And so since then, I've been adding the middle initial G. And now if you Google Paul G. McManus, you'll find the actual me, which...
It's funny you say that because I did Google the axe murderer and
you're like, do I want this guy on my podcast? I don't know.
I was just pretty sure he didn't have a LinkedIn profile and you did. So it kind of went there, but pleasure to have you on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me and to answer your question. So yeah, I was meant to be third generation taking over my family's office products business, but I saw the writing on the wall and I decided that wasn't for me. And since 2016, I've been working exclusively with financial advisors to do the things that you mentioned, which essentially comes down to getting leads, growing their business, etc. But along the way, I discovered that, at least in my experience, I think one of the biggest challenges that many financial advisors face is that too often they're seen as a salesperson. The CPA oftentimes is seen as that trusted advisor. The financial advisor is too often seen as a salesperson. And I saw this play out in real life. And so when I got started, I focused on working with advisors to help them get leads and appointments using LinkedIn, and to some great success. I mean, my very first client, I helped him go from $200,000 of commission to over $2.5 million of commission. So I'm like, wow, there's something here, which got me really excited about it. But still along the way, what I found is that if a person isn't positioned properly, if they don't have what I describe as authority positioning, you end up doing a whole lot more work than you need to in order to drive the results that you desire. And so I discovered the power of authorship as really one of the, I would say, most straightforward and I don't want to say easiest, but one of the best tools for a financial advisor to leverage to establish themselves as that authority and really flip the script from going from typically having to be seen as a salesperson and chase down clients, et cetera, to now being seen more as an educator, a teacher, et cetera, that sought after advisor and increasingly have clients come to them. And so that since 2020 has been what I've been primarily focused on, which is helping financial advisors write and publish a short book so that they can be that much more effective in their marketing, their sales, and the impact that they ultimately have.
And are they writing the book with are you as their ghostwriter per se, and you pretty much already have that content? And so it's basically writing something along the lines of their practice, them and themselves, and expanding on that?
Yeah, so great question. So the premise that we have is that most financial advisors, and most people broadly, but most financial advisors are not writers. And so when they think about writing a book, it's intimidating and they shy away from it because they just don't see themselves that way. But what most of financial advisors do have in common, which I love, is that they're generally super interesting people that have a lot of good storytellers, know how to engage clients, build rapport, influence people, and all of those things. And ultimately, what our process is that we take them through typically a 6-week process where we interview them on Zoom for an hour a week or an hour per session. And over the course of about 6 sessions, we extract so much amazing material from them. So it's their stories, it's their philosophy, it's what their niche is, their target audience, everything that makes them special and unique, and that they typically do day to day, just one on one, and it's not being captured, right? And so we start with a blank sheet of paper. It's not templated. It's not, this is the script we're going to put you in and insert your picture on the back of the book. No, it's a very unique book
And
that's
how
unique.
how long are the books? Like, how long do they tend to be? Are we looking at like 30 pages? Are we looking at 100 pages?
Yeah, great question. So my own book, it's called The Short Book Formula. And my insight was that authorship is powerful and it positions you well. But by the same token, if your ideal client or prospect doesn't take the time to read your book, it doesn't have the impact that it should have. And so the short book formula is built around writing books. They're typically somewhere between 12,000 to 25,000 words. And let me break down to you what that means is that the page count is usually 100 pages, maybe up to 140 pages in that range. But the real magic spot is that someone can read the book from cover to cover in roughly 1 to 2 hours. And that's where the magic happens.
Excellent. And that process, obviously, you said it takes about 6 hours of one-on-one Zooms with you.
Yep.
And from the start of that process, are we talking about probably 5 months to 6 months between the interview time and the ability to write the book to get that into the publisher's hands to get those produced?
Yeah, we try to do everything in 6 to 12 weeks. So the interview process we do once a week for an hour over 6 weeks. And we just space it out because we find that, I mean, we could do it faster, but we find that we encourage people in between to really spend an hour or two just thinking, reflecting, gathering the stories so that they come prepared and we really capture gems from them. And then the second six, and then so that's the first 6 weeks. The second 6 weeks, we then take all of that, we write the first draft, we provide it to the client, they get out their red pen, they mark it up, anything they want changed. Ultimately, what we want is that they're super happy with the book and it properly represents their voice and their ideas. And so sometimes there's a couple rounds we go back and forth, but once they give us the thumbs up, and then in many cases they have to send it to their compliance department, and compliance always gets out their red pen and we get that and we make some revisions. But once our client gives us the thumbs up, compliance gives us the thumbs up, then we take it and we publish the book for them.
So let's talk about the after effect of the published book. And the reason is that I think there are a lot of advisors that do have this book. I've seen it through either interviewing them or it's their gold bar, and they're showing everybody this gold bar. What's the best way to market that gold bar and for it to be utilized to actually gain new business?
Yep, great question. And that's one of the questions I always get. I'll start by saying that it's not about earning royalties, right? It's not about writing a book to sell. It's about writing a book that sells.
They're not going to make any money on the sale of the book.
The
only way they make money on the sale is to get clients. Yes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, why would you want to write a book and infuse it with your marketing and sales? So I'll share some specific client examples, but in my own case, and what really attracted me to this was my very first book made me $1 million. And it was not on the sale of the book. It was based on the business that I generated as a direct consequence of that book. And so that got me into, okay, everything I do needs a book attached to it. So I've written multiple books since then. But everyone's different and unique, right? So it depends on what their existing environment is before we go and say, hey, do X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to give you a couple of specific examples that maybe someone can relate to. So on the I'll say on the high end, meaning that one of my clients, his name is John Cutton, and he does, I want to say, last time I checked, it was $10 billion of AUM. So he's like doing pretty well. And he's working with us on multiple books. And the first book that we helped him write and publish was a client-facing book, meaning retail clients. And he doesn't see clients, right? I mean, he has, upwards to 100 advisors at his firm. And what he did was he wanted to write the book to capture the core values and the value proposition from the CEO, from the founder, capture that in a book, and then have his advisors use it as a tool. But he has thousands of families that he works with. And so one of the things we did is that we sent out or actually 2 copies of the book with a letter to every single one of their existing clients. Well, guess what happens? Suddenly, and here's what we believe happens, right? Suddenly, the existing client has a stronger relationship with the firm and even with the founder, even though he maybe never talked to them before one on one, because now they get a better sense of who he is. And the thing about authorship, which is really unique, is that invariably it raises your status. Now, you and I can spend hours and hours pouring our heart into doing podcasts, but typically someone's not going to come and say, wow, you're congratulations on that podcast, right? That typically is not the thing. Whereas when you're an author, immediately people come out of the woodwork to say, wow, I'm impressed. You did that. And so your status gets elevated, you build a relationship, and you can, in his case, have that one-on-one relationship even when he's not part of the process day to day. And so that's if you have a bigger firm and maybe you have a team and you're looking to not be in the weeds of the day-to-day communication and the client-facing stuff, but you still want to have that direct connection to clients, that's one of the, I'd say, low-hanging fruit ways to use the book. And of course, in his case, he also sent out 2 books, one for the client, but also with the letters, hey, here's another one. Maybe you can introduce us to someone, right? It's so much easier to make an introduction to an author than it is to make an introduction to an unknown financial advisor. It's night and day difference.
And what's the cost to get you guys to do this process? And then as far as distribution of the books or paying for the books, what's that cost?
Yep. So it varies. And we have 3 different programs. So it can range on the low end for our services. On the low end, I want to say it's $9,000. And currently on the upper end, it's $18,000. And we have one in the middle. So we have 3 different services and that's helping someone go do everything from blank sheet of paper to publishing it either on Amazon or private printing it, depending on what compliance says. We intentionally don't include the actual unit cost of the book because what we don't do is we don't mark it up, right? So a lot of people have this book program and they mark it up and now they're paying inflated prices and maybe they buy 500 and they have dust accumulating on the books behind them. We don't do that. The technology exists today where whether it's Amazon or a private printer, you can literally print a book on demand, a single one, for somewhere between $2.50 to $4 per book based on the way that we do it. And so we simply set that up and facilitate that so our clients can buy 1 book and have it shipped directly to their clients, or they can buy 500, depending if they're having an event. So it's really up to them. We give them that flexibility to do that.
Got it. Okay. So about anywhere from $2.50 to $4 to get the book in the hand of the client, plus whatever your charges are to get the book on paper.
Yep. And that's, yes. And there's 2 things though. So Amazon is amazing. Whereas if you get the book on Amazon, if compliance approves that, you can literally print on demand and ship for free. And Amazon doesn't like this because I think they lose money in this process. And so if you abuse that system too much, they're going to shut it down. And I've had that happen before. With a private printer, when you're actually paying for shipping properly, it's more $3 to $4 per book plus $4 shipping and handling if you're literally sending it to a single person.
Sending it to a client. Interesting. Now, I also see part of your business model is LinkedIn and kind of maximizing LinkedIn. And it's funny, one of the things I hate, and again, don't take this the wrong way, is I get bombarded on LinkedIn from everybody in the world that wants to get me leads or referrals and so on and so forth. And I have never been the sucker to do it, but there are many suckers. And the question is, does it work? And how do you get it to work? And what does that look like? Because there's a lot of them, and I'm not putting you in the same basket because I'm sure there's bad baskets and good baskets.
There are. And there's not a single answer. So I'll give you a little bit from my experience. So my very first client back in 2016, who I touched upon before, he was the first financial advisor that I worked with. And this was before I started doing books, and we strictly did LinkedIn. And I did this as a managed service for him. So we worked closely together for about 2 years. And based on the activity we did on LinkedIn, I helped him go from a couple $100,000 of commission to over $2.5 million of business. And so he was able to land some amazing clients as a direct result of LinkedIn. To your point, now, does that work for everybody? No. And I would say part of it was that was pre-COVID. That was when LinkedIn was a little bit, it wasn't used as heavily by everybody. I think what happened with COVID is that because everyone was locked in their house, everybody and their mother started jumping on LinkedIn, and it really diluted the impact that we were seeing for our clients on LinkedIn. So we had to innovate. What I mean by that is that simply reaching out to someone and essentially saying, "Hey, I see that you're a business owner and I'm a financial advisor and we should have a conversation. When would you like to schedule?" That approach is, while it's not the best approach in the first place, increasingly lost its value. So what we did is we introduced what I call a book funnel. And people don't like to be sold to, but they naturally like to buy and they're curious. And so when you design a book really as the core of the messaging and you have a specific target audience, let's say your audience is nurses and you have the book helping position yourself as the guy that helps nurses achieve X, Y, and Z. Now that's a totally different ask because when you reach out cold even and you say, "Hey, I just wrote this book about how nurses achieve X, Y, and Z. Can I send you a complimentary copy?" Well, what naturally happens is they start saying yes. They're starting now to come to you. And then that can lead gradually to next steps, which includes getting scheduled on calls, et cetera, et cetera. But what I found in my experience is that you need an approach like that people are much more likely to say yes to versus just saying, "Hey, let's have a conversation and let's have a coffee or network and things like that," because no one really wants to do that.
So it's basically targeting the niche market per se. And it's funny, I've seen advisors kind of switch their niches. All of a sudden they're helping nurses, and then the next 6 months their niches is that they help small business owners that and lawyers, or completely change their niche.
Yeah, and that doesn't really work because people see through that. Having the specific niche as a starting point, it's what helps people pay attention through the noise, right? But ultimately, I mean, advisors are in the business of selling trust, and people don't just make sudden decisions about their retirement savings and their investments and all these things because, "Hey, you work with nurses this week or
Yeah.
this month. You fooled me," right?
Yeah.
That doesn't work. You really have to have a body of work that they can point to. You have to have clients and examples and testimonials and case studies and other stuff that they can say, "Wow, this person really is a big fish in a small pond in this community. Therefore, I'm much more likely to be influenced by him versus for these 2 weeks, I'm going to specialize in this. The next week, I'm going to specialize in that." That really doesn't work.
So the combination of the book and LinkedIn together and utilizing that as a platform to establish who you are is actually your secret sauce, we'll call it.
Yes. And I would add one more step to it. And this involves both LinkedIn and the book. And this is something that we call the Authority Accelerator, is podcasting, and especially guest podcasting. And so just like I'm doing now, and you're going to be on my podcast, is that what I find is that when you have that specific message for an audience and it's really done well, you want to identify the people for it. You want to have something that they can say yes to, but then you want to go and speak about it as much as you can. And so I go and do guest podcasting all as much as I can, and I talk about the book. Well, guess what? Not only then am I tapping into new audiences, but I take that material and then I repurpose it back on LinkedIn to the audience, say, "Hey, I was just featured on the XYZ podcast. We talked about X, Y, and Z. Hey, here's the episode." And so what that does, I mean, in terms of online marketing, my highest quality leads and appointments come invariably from guest podcasting. And this is people that come, they show up and they're like, "Okay, tell me more. I listen to the podcast. There's a basis of trust," and they make quick decisions about moving forward. And so just to break that down again, it's not just LinkedIn. LinkedIn and LinkedIn in a book is good. LinkedIn, book, and now additional media and authority talking about the book and then pushing it back into LinkedIn, I would say is best.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You're cross marketing all over the place. And that's going to get your word out there or your name out there.
I call it surround sound, is that you want to start showing up where someone's paying attention. I mean, and really, I mean, I'm just some person living where I live and someone else is where they are. But suddenly I'm like showing up in different places and they're like, "Oh, I heard you on this podcast. I heard you on that podcast. I actually got your book." And suddenly you go from complete stranger to now having a in-depth conversation about how you can help them get what they want.
But
But people,
But at the end of the day, like if people are going to need to commit to whatever they're doing, meaning like you can pay money and get the book, but if you're not out marketing it and you're not appropriately doing anything, it's going to be a waste of money for you. You have to put in the effort and the means, and also have some sort of systematic approach system in place that is effective and works. It is a numbers game at the end of the day, but you do need to attack those levels of interest, because if you don't, doesn't matter how much you pay for the stuff, it's not going to end up adding value to you.
for the most part, I would agree with that. At the end of the day, in all my experience for myself, as well as working with hundreds of financial advisors, helping them to accomplish these things, what I've seen works consistently well is a combination of speaking, whether it's in person, seminars, or online podcasting, webinars, etc., and tying that into authority and a core message that they get recognized for. Those two things together, it has a 1 + 1 = 3 effect.
100%. Awesome. Paul, obviously my audience is all financial advisors, and I know there's at least a few, if not a bunch, that could absolutely use your services. What's a good way to get a hold of you?
Best way to reach out and to learn more is to go to my website. It's theshortbookformula.com. And there you can get a complimentary copy of my audiobook for my book, The Short Book Formula. And if it makes sense to talk, my calendar information is there as well.
Excellent. Yeah, and I see that you use the calendar in the appointment setting, and it's interesting because I know that's the new age way of doing things, and I'm in my 40s, so I'm kind of a new age advisor, but I'm also an old school advisor. And every time I get the calendars, I'm like, I'm not signing up for a calendar, but I think the younger generation, from my experience, is very much involved in that, and it's a great way to connect with people. So
I would add to that, and to me, I only really do it, even if it's a referral, it's a warm referral, I still use my Calendly because
Yeah.
because there's a sense of authority, and if someone who takes those steps and really goes through kind of some of the hoops that you've intentionally set out and does that, you're gonna the person is demonstrating that they're genuinely interested in what you have to do, so you're gonna immediately reduce tire kickers, and the other result is that they're that much more likely to say yes to whatever it is. And so to me, that's people have to come to that system for me. Now I realize for advisors, and I've done it both ways, where exchange numbers, this, that, and the other, but I find on average, the person who's built up the authority through whatever means it is, their ideal people will go through those steps to get to them.
the percentage has
And
got to be higher. Yeah, I fully see that, and specifically in what you do, I fully see that. So 100%. Awesome, Paul. It was a pleasure having you on. They can also reach you on LinkedIn, I believe.
I am on LinkedIn, and if you Google me, just remember to stick in that G between Paul and McManus.
I can confirm, if you just do Paul McManus, you're not going to get him. So hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks so much.